Money usually talks, but for Caleb Sterling, it screamed power. He believed he was untouchable, treating the woman pouring his wine like trash. A broke waitress he humiliated for sport. He laughed while firing her. He smirked while tipping a single penny. However, Caleb made a fatal error that night. He never checked her eyes. If he had, he would have realized she wasn't just serving dinner. She was serving his last meal. This poor waitress held the key to his darkest secret. She wasn't there to take his order. She was there to rip his entire privileged life apart. The rain in Seattle wasn't just rain that Tuesday night. It was a relentless, freezing sheet of water that seemed to scrub the city of its hope. Inside l'Orangerie, however, the weather didn't exist. The air was scented with white truffle and old money. The lighting was golden, designed to make the jewelry of the clientele sparkle just a little brighter. Rowan Bennett adjusted her apron in the back kitchen, her hands trembling slightly. It wasn't the cold. It was the name on the reservation list for Table 1, Sterling, Caleb Sterling, the CEO of Sterling Hale Pharmaceuticals, the man currently gracing the cover of Forbes as the biotech visionary of the decade to the world. He was the savior who had lowered the cost of insulin and patented the new miracle heart valve. To Rowan, he was a ghost, a monster draped in Italian silk. Rowan snapped out of it. Jean-Luc, the floor manager, snapped his fingers in front of her face. Jean-Luc was a man who sweated anxiety. He wiped his forehead with a handkerchief. Table 1 is seated. Do not embarrass me. Mr. Sterling requested the quiet server. That is you. No talking unless spoken to. Invisible. Do you understand? Invisible, Rowan repeated, her voice steady, though her heart was hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. I understand. Jean-Luc. She picked up the tray of crystal water glasses. She caught her reflection in the stainless steel of the kitchen pass. Her hair was pulled back in a severe, unflattering bun. She wore no makeup, highlighting the dark circles under her eyes. She looked tired. She looked worn down by life. She looked exactly like what she was supposed to be, a 28-year-old single woman, barely making rent, drowning in debt. Perfect camouflage. She walked out onto the floor. Table 1 was the prime spot, secluded in a velvet-roped alcove near the fireplace. Caleb Sterling sat with his back to the window. He was younger than he looked in photos, maybe late 30s, with a jawline that could cut glass and eyes that looked bored with the entire world. Beside him sat a woman who looked like a supermodel, draped in diamonds that cost more than the building Rowan lived in. Across from them were two older men in suits, investors from Zurich. If Rowan's research was correct, the valuation is absurd. Caleb, one of the investors was saying as Rowan approached, the FDA approval is pending. If that safety report leaks... Caleb waved a hand dismissively, cutting the man off. The report doesn't exist. Gentlemen, because there are no safety issues. It's a ghost story. A myth. Sterling Hale is bulletproof. Rowan placed the water glass down in front of him. Her hand didn't shake. Caleb didn't look up. He didn't break his conversation. He simply lifted a finger, pointing at his empty wine glass without acknowledging her presence. It was the gesture one used for a dog. The 82 Petrus, Caleb said to the air. Now, magnificent choice, sir, Rowan said softly. Caleb stopped. He turned his head slowly, his ice-blue eyes scanning her up and down. It wasn't a look of attraction. It was a look of appraisal, like a man checking a car for scratches. He looked at her scuffed shoes, her fraying cuffs, the exhaustion in her posture. "I didn't ask for your opinion on the wine," Caleb said, his voice loud enough that the table next to them went silent. "I asked for the bottle. Do you know how much a bottle of Chateau Petrus 1982 costs?" Rowan swallowed. "I believe it's around $5,000, sir." Caleb laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He looked at his date. 5,000. She thinks it's 5,000. Cute. He turned back to Rowan, his smile vanishing instantly. "It's $600 a sip. Don't speak to me about the price. Just pour it. And try not to let your poverty infect the vintage." The table chuckled. The supermodel covered her mouth, giggling. Rowan felt the heat rise up her neck, but she kept her head down. "Right away, sir." She walked back to the cellar, her fists clenched so hard her nails dug into her palms. She remembered a different life, a life where she wore dresses, like that woman. A life before her father, the lead chemist at a rival firm, was found dead in his car, a suicide that happened 2 days before he was going to testify against a certain rising star named Caleb Sterling. She grabbed the bottle of Petrus. Her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. "Is the device in place?" Rowan typed back one word. "Yes." She took a deep breath, composed her face into a mask of subservience, and walked back into the lion's den. The dinner service was a masterclass in degradation. For 2 hours, Caleb Sterling used Rowan as a prop for his own ego. When she brought the appetizers, he complained the plate was too hot and made her hold it for 30 seconds to prove him wrong. When she poured the water, he accused her of filling it too high, claiming it ruined the aesthetic of the table. He was performing. He was showing the investors that he was a man of absolute dominance. If he could crush a person this easily, imagine what he could do to a competitor. "You know," Caleb said, leaning back and swirling the dark red wine. "It's tragic. Really. Some people are born to lead, to innovate, and some—" He gestured vaguely at Rowan, who was clearing the bread plates. "Some are born to serve. It's genetic. Darwinism in action. She probably thinks she's unlucky, but luck has nothing to do with it. It's about capacity." "Caleb, stop it," the woman next to him whispered, though she didn't look particularly upset. "You're making her cry." Rowan wasn't crying. She was calculating. Every time she leaned in to clear a plate, the small, high-powered microphone, disguised as a button on her vest, captured every syllable. She needed him to talk about the ghost protocol. She needed him to admit that the clinical trials for his new heart valve were faked. But he was too careful with the investors. He was just being a bully, not a criminal. She needed to push him. She needed to make him angry. An angry man makes mistakes. An angry man gets loud. Rowan approached with the main course, a sea bass with saffron reduction. As she placed the plate down in front of the Swiss investor, she deliberately allowed her elbow to slip. The movement was subtle, practiced. The sauce boat in her other hand tipped. A splash of bright yellow saffron sauce landed on the sleeve of Caleb's pristine tuxedo jacket. The restaurant went deathly silent. Caleb stared at the stain. It was the size of a dime, but to him, it looked like a bullet hole. He slowly stood up. The chair scraped, screeching against the floor. "You stupid cow," he whispered. "I am so sorry, sir," Rowan gasped, grabbing a napkin and dabbing at the sleeve. "I tripped. Don't touch me." Caleb shoved her hand away with such force that Rowan stumbled back. hitting a service cart. Silverware crashed to the floor with a deafening clatter. Jean-Luc, the manager, was sprinting across the dining room. Mr. Sterling, I am horrified. I am— Shut up! Jean-Luc, Caleb hissed. He loomed over Rowan. He was tall, intimidating, radiating pure malice. Do you know what this suit is? It's bespoke. It's worth more than your life. I can pay for the cleaning, Rowan stammered, playing the part of the terrified victim perfectly. Tears, real ones now born of adrenaline, welled in her eyes. Please, I need this job. Pay for it. Caleb laughed, looking around the restaurant, inviting the other diners to join in his amusement. You can't even pay for a haircut. Look at you. You reek of desperation. He reached into his pocket and pulled out his wallet. He extracted a crisp $100 bill. He held it out to her. Rowan reached for it, confused. Caleb let it drop to the floor. Pick it up. Rowan froze. I said, pick it up, Caleb commanded. That's your severance, because you're fired. But I want to see you crawl for it first. Show these gentlemen your true station in life. The investors looked uncomfortable now. Caleb, that's enough, one muttered. No, it's a lesson, Caleb snarled. Pick it up. Rowan looked at the money on the plush carpet. She looked at Caleb's polished shoes. She knew the camera in the decorative plant behind him, a camera she had hacked into earlier that day, was capturing his face perfectly. She slowly knelt. She reached for the bill. Pathetic, Caleb sneered, kicking the bill slightly away just as her fingers touched it. Go on. Fetch. Rowan crawled forward and grabbed the bill. She stood up, her knees dusty, clutching the money. Jean-Luc, Caleb barked. Get this trash out of my sight, and if I see her in this city again, I'll buy the building she lives in and evict her. Immediately. Mr. Sterling, Rowan, get out. Leave your apron. Jean-Luc screamed, grabbing her arm. As Rowan was dragged away, she looked back one last time. Caleb was laughing, wiping his sleeve, raising his glass to the investors. See, he said, his voice carrying clearly to her vest microphone. You cut the weak links, just like we did with the Trial B participants. You eliminate the problem, and the profit remains. Trial B. Rowan's heart stopped, then exploded into a gallop. He said it. He admitted there were participants they eliminated. She let Jean-Luc push her out the back door into the pouring rain. She fell onto the wet asphalt of the alleyway. Jean-Luc threw her coat at her. Don't come back. Rowan, you're finished. The heavy metal door slammed shut. Rowan sat in the mud and the rain. She was fired. She was humiliated. She had been treated like a dog. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small recording device connected to the button on her vest. The red light was still blinking. She stopped crying. She wiped the rain from her face. A slow, cold smile spread across her lips. I'm not finished. Caleb, she whispered to the darkness. I'm just getting started. Rowan didn't go home to cry. She went home to work. Her apartment was a studio in the crumbling, industrial district of the city, a place where the sirens were constant and the streetlights were always broken. To her neighbors, she was Rowan, the quiet girl who smelled like restaurant grease. But inside apartment 4B, the reality was starkly different. She locked the 3 deadbolts on her door. She stripped off the stained uniform, kicking it into the corner. She walked to the large, battered wardrobe against the wall and pushed it aside. Behind it wasn't peeling wallpaper, but a wall of corkboards, schematics, and high-end server racks humming with blue light. Rowan Bennett wasn't just a waitress. Before her life imploded, she had been a senior cybersecurity analyst for a defense contractor. She knew how to bury data, and she knew how to dig it up. She sat down at her desk, her fingers flying across a mechanical keyboard. She plugged the recording device into her rig. "Isolate track 2, she muttered. "Amplify background. Filter the clatter." On her screens, sound waves danced. She scrubbed through the recording of the dinner service, the insults, the laughter, the sound of the wine being poured. And then, the moment of truth. You cut the weak links, just like we did with the Trial B participants. You eliminate the problem, and the profit remains. Rowan leaned back, closing her eyes. Trial B. She opened a locked drawer and pulled out a faded, water-damaged notebook. It was the only thing she had recovered from her father's car after the crash. Dr. Marcus Bennett had been a careful man. He wrote in code. She flipped to the last page. In shaky handwriting, he had written, "Trial B failure rate 40%. Micro-clotting in the Aegis valve? Sterling knows. He's burying the bodies. If I don't make it to the hearing, look for the red ledger." Rowan looked up at the photo of her father taped to the monitor. "I got him. Dad." He said it, but her excitement faded as quickly as it came. An audio recording obtained illegally in a private restaurant. It was inadmissible in court. Sterling's lawyers would argue he was talking about firing employees, not killing patients. They would bury her in lawsuits before she could even file a complaint. She needed the red ledger. According to her father's notes, the red ledger was a physical book, an ego trip for Caleb. He kept a handwritten record of every bribe, every falsified report, and every fixed problem. It was his insurance policy and his trophy. Where would a narcissist like Caleb keep his most prized possession? Rowan turned to her second monitor. She pulled up the blueprints of Sterling Hale headquarters. Too secure. Biometric scanners every 10 feet. She pulled up his country estate. Too large. Too many hiding spots. Then, she pulled up the live feed from the camera she had hacked in l'Orangerie. The restaurant was closing. She watched Caleb leave. He didn't get into his car immediately. He stood on the curb, checking his phone. Rowan zoomed in. High-definition enhancement. He was looking at an app connected to his penthouse smart home system. He was checking the status of a specific room, the wine vault. Rowan smirked. Of course. The man who obsessed over $600 sips of wine would keep his secrets where he felt most powerful. In his penthouse, inside the temperature-controlled vault where he kept his vintage Petrus. But getting into the penthouse of the Millennium Tower was impossible. It had a private elevator, armed guards in the lobby, and face recognition software. A waitress couldn't just walk in. Rowan looked at the footage of herself, crawling on the floor of the restaurant, picking up the $100 bill. "No," she whispered. "A waitress can't walk in." She began to type, initiating a program she had been building for 6 months. A deep fake algorithm, a digital mask. But a billionaire can... She wasn't going to break in as a thief. She was going to be invited in as a savior. But first, she had to burn his world down just enough to make him desperate. She took the video file of the restaurant incident, the raw footage from the security camera she'd hacked. She didn't edit it. She didn't add music. She just uploaded it to Twitter, Reddit, and TikTok with a simple caption, "Biotech visionary Caleb Sterling, how he treats the poor." She hit enter. Let's see how you handle the heat. Caleb. By the next morning, Caleb Sterling wasn't a visionary. He was a villain. The video had 40 million views. The image of him kicking the bill away from Rowan's grasping hand was on the front page of every digital newspaper. #Boycott Sterling was trending worldwide. Sterling Hale's stock took a 12% nosedive at the opening bell. In his penthouse office, overlooking the grey Seattle skyline, Caleb threw his tablet across the room. It shattered against the wall of rare art. "Fix this!" he screamed at his PR team, who were huddled on the leather sofa, looking terrified. "I pay you millions to protect my image. Why is the internet talking about some clumsy waitress?" "Sir," his head of PR, a sharp woman named Jessica, spoke up tentatively. "It's the optics. It plays into the narrative that you're unfeeling. The investors are spooked. The FDA is suddenly asking questions about the Aegis valve trials again, because the public pressure is mounting." Caleb froze. "The FDA? They have nothing. They have public outrage," Jessica said. "We need a pivot, immediately. You need to show humility. You need to show that you care about the little people." Caleb sneered. "I hate the little people." "We know, sir. But you have to pretend you don't." Jessica pulled up a presentation. "The annual Gala for Hope is this Saturday. Usually, it's just a tax write-off. We need to turn it into the event of the century. You will announce a massive donation to poverty relief. You will cry on stage. You will act broken." Caleb paced the room. "Fine. A gala. We invite the whales. We pump the stock back up. We need new blood, too," Jessica added. "We've had interest from a European venture capital firm, Argentum. They are looking to invest heavy capital in biotech. Their heiress, Sophia Vane, is in Seattle. If you can secure her investment publicly at the gala, the stock stabilizes." "Sophia Vane," Caleb mused. "Old money. Ancient money." Jessica lied. She didn't know that the wiki page for Sophia Vane had been created 3 days ago by Rowan Bennett. She's reclusive, very private, loves art, wine, and exclusivity. Caleb straightened his tie. "Get her an invite. I'll charm her. I'll take her money, and we'll bury this waitress story." 3 days later, Rowan stood in front of her mirror. The waitress was gone. Her hair was dyed a platinum blonde and cut into a sharp, expensive bob. She wore green contact lenses that changed the shape of her gaze. Her skin was bronzed. She wore a backless emerald gown that she had bought using the last of her father's hidden savings money she had sworn never to touch unless it was for this moment. She wasn't Rowan Bennett, the girl who scrapped for tips. She was Sophia Vane, heiress to the Argentum fortune. She checked her earpiece. "Comms check." A distorted voice crackled back. It was Flux, a hacker friend she'd never met in person, only on the dark web. Loud and clear. "Sophia, your backstory is planted. The fake bank accounts show a balance of $500 million. You are a ghost with a gold card. Is the invite confirmed? You're on the VIP list, table 1, right next to the shark." Rowan took a deep breath. This was the most dangerous part. Caleb had looked her in the eyes 3 nights ago. If he recognized her, she was dead. His security team didn't play nice. "He won't know me," she reassured herself. "He never really saw me. He only saw a uniform." She grabbed a clutch purse. Inside was a localized EMP device and a high-speed data cloner. The gala was held at the Seattle Art Museum. It was a sea of black ties and fake smiles. Photographers flashed bulbs like lightning storms as limousines pulled up. When Rowan stepped out of her rented Bentley, the crowd hushed. She moved with a practiced arrogance, a sway of hips that screamed entitlement. She didn't look at the cameras. She looked through them. She walked up the red carpet. "Name?" the security guard asked, checking his tablet. "Vane," she said, her voice an octave lower than usual, adopting a slight, indistinguishable European accent. "Sophia Vane. Right this way. Miss Vane." "Mr. Sterling is expecting you." She entered the grand hall. It was opulent, dripping with crystals. And there, in the center of the room, holding court, was Caleb Sterling. He looked charming. He was laughing, shaking hands, playing the part of the benevolent philanthropist. Rowan felt a surge of bile, but she swallowed it down. She glided through the crowd, a shark in silk. Caleb turned, his eyes locked onto her. For a second, Rowan's heart stopped. Did he see the waitress? Did he see the girl he humiliated? Caleb's face lit up with a predatory smile. He walked toward her, arms open. "Ms. Vane," he purred, taking her hand and kissing the air above it. "I've heard so much about you. Thank you for gracing us with your presence." He didn't recognize her, not even a flicker. To him, the waitress and this woman were two different species. "Mr. Sterling," Rowan said, smiling a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I heard you had a difficult week. I thought I'd come see if the man matches the controversy." Caleb laughed. That same barking laugh from the restaurant. "Please, call me Caleb. And don't believe everything you see on the internet. It's all just noise. Tonight is about the future." "I love the future," Rowan said, stepping closer, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Show it to me." The trap was set. Now, she just had to get him alone. The gala was a blur of champagne flutes and hollow laughter, but Rowan's mind was a tactical HUD. Tracking guards, exits, and Caleb's fluctuating stress levels. She stood on the balcony with Caleb, the city lights shimmering below them. He was looser now, 3 scotches deep, feeding off the admiration of the crowd. "You know, Sophia," Caleb said, leaning against the marble railing. "Most people here, they want my money. They want a piece of the pie. But you seem bored by it." "I have my own pie." "Caleb," Rowan said, swirling her drink, "I'm not interested in your money. I'm interested in your taste." She paused, letting the silence hang. "Rumor has it you possess the only crate of 82 Petrus left in the Northern Hemisphere. My father spent his life trying to acquire one. He failed." Caleb's eyes lit up. The bait was taken. His ego was the lock, and flattery was the key. "Your father didn't know where to look." Caleb smirked. "I have it. In my private vault. It makes this swill we're drinking look like vinegar." "I doubt it," Rowan challenged, turning away slightly. "Men like you always exaggerate." Caleb bristled. "I never exaggerate. Come with me. We're leaving. Now. Right now, I want to see the look on your face when you taste it." The ride to the Millennium Tower was silent. Caleb was texting furiously, likely damage control for the PR disaster, while Rowan sat calmly, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. They bypassed the lobby security with a wave of Caleb's hand. The private elevator shot up 80 stories in seconds, the pressure popping in Rowan's ears. Ding. The doors opened to the penthouse. It wasn't a home. It was a museum of cold, hard surfaces. Black marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, and minimalist furniture that looked uncomfortable to sit on. "Make yourself at home," Caleb said, tossing his jacket onto a chair. "I need to grab the keycard for the vault. It's biometric, voice-activated. The works. Fort Knox has nothing on my wine cellar." "Impressive," Rowan murmured, as Caleb walked into the master bedroom to retrieve the pass. Rowan tapped her earpiece 3 times. "Flux, I'm in," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "Copy that," the distorted voice in her ear replied. "I'm looping the hallway cameras. You have 3 minutes before the system resets its encryption key. If he sees you touching anything other than a wine glass, you're dead. 3 minutes. Go." She didn't wait. She moved to the large oak desk in the corner of the living room. She needed to plant the bug. She pulled a tiny, translucent sticker from her clutch, a high-frequency audio transmitter, and stuck it under the lip of the desk. "Got it," she whispered. "Good. Now get to the vault. He's coming back." Rowan walked casually toward the glass-walled room at the far end of the penthouse. It was a climate-controlled sanctuary. Rows of bottles worth more than most houses lined the cedar racks. Caleb emerged from the bedroom, a platinum keycard in his hand. "Ready!" He swiped the card. A heavy click echoed. The glass door slid open with a hiss of escaping pressurized air. "After you," he said. They stepped inside. The air was cool, smelling of cork and oak. "There she is," Caleb said, pointing to a dusty wooden crate on the center pedestal. He looked at it with more affection than he had shown any human being. "Magnificent," Rowan said. She walked around the pedestal, her eyes scanning not the wine, but the shelves behind it. Her father's notes were specific. The red ledger, bound in crimson leather. "Looks like a vintage logbook." She spotted it, top shelf, tucked between 2 magnums of 1945 Romani Conti. It was unassuming, blending in with the antique aesthetic of the room. She had to get him out. "Caleb," she said, turning to him with a sultry smile, "this deserves a proper decant. But I don't see a decanter worthy of it." Caleb frowned. "I have a baccarat crystal decanter in the kitchen. The maid must have left it there." "Would you get it?" Rowan asked, trailing a finger along the wooden crate. "I want everything to be perfect." Caleb hesitated. He looked at her, then at the door. "Don't touch the bottle until I get back. The sediment is delicate. I wouldn't dream of it." He turned and walked out of the vault. As soon as his back crossed the threshold, Rowan moved. "Flux. Timer. 60 seconds. Rowan. He walks fast." She grabbed a heavy step stool, climbed up, and snatched the red book. Her hands were shaking. She opened it. It wasn't just a wine log. It was a graveyard. Page 14. Senator Thorne. Payment $2.5 million via shell company, Blue Horizon. Purpose, Fast Track FDA. Approval for Aegis. Page 22. Trial B. Subject 404. Deceased. Cause valve failure. Action, family paid $50,000 for silence. NDA signed. Page 23. Marcus Bennett, chemist. Action, eliminated. Method, break line. Tampering. Status resolved. Rowan choked back a sob. There it was. Her father's name. Eliminated. She pulled out her phone. She didn't have time to steal the book. He would notice it missing instantly. She switched to the high-speed scanner app Flux had installed. Snap. 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 She photographed the bribery pages, the death logs, the admission of murder. 30 seconds. Rowan, he's in the kitchen. Flux warned. She flipped to the back. a list of offshore accounts. Snap. He's coming back. 10 seconds. Rowan shoved the book back onto the shelf. She jumped down from the stool, kicked it back into place, and smoothed her dress. She heard Caleb's footsteps on the marble floor outside. She turned to the crate of Waitress, her heart pounding so hard she thought it would crack her ribs. She placed her hand on the crate just as Caleb walked in, holding the crystal decanter. He stopped. He looked at her. He looked at the shelf behind her. "What were you doing?" he asked, his voice losing its warmth. Rowan froze. Had she moved the book back perfectly? Was it out of alignment? "I was just admiring the collection," she said, keeping her voice steady. "You have a bottle of Screaming Eagle up there. Very rare." Caleb stared at her for a long, agonizing second. Then, his eyes drifted down to her hand resting on the Waitress crate. "I told you not to touch it," he said softly. "I couldn't help myself," Rowan whispered, stepping closer to him, invading his personal space to distract him. "It's intoxicating." Caleb's gaze softened. The predator in him relaxed, replaced by the narcissist. "It is," he agreed. He set the decanter down. "Let's open it," Rowan breathed. She had the photos, she had the proof. But as Caleb reached for the corkscrew, Rowan's phone, tucked into her clutch on the pedestal, lit up. A text message notification. Caleb glanced at it. It wasn't a text from a bank or a friend. It was a push notification from the app L'Orangerie Employee Portal. Alert: final severance payment processed for Rowan Bennett. Caleb stared at the screen. He read the name, Rowan Bennett. He looked up at Sophia Vane. The silence in the vault was sudden and absolute. "Who is Rowan Bennett?" Caleb asked, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. Rowan's blood ran cold. She had forgotten to disable the notifications on her old work app. "My assistant," Rowan lied quickly. She handles my domestic staff payments." Caleb didn't blink. He reached out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was like iron. "You're lying," he hissed. He pulled her closer, studying her face. He looked past the contact lenses, past the makeup. He looked at the structure of her bones. Recognition dawned in his eyes. A horrible, dawning realization. "The waitress," he breathed. "You're the waitress." He shoved her backward. She stumbled, hitting the wine rack. "You think you can play me?" Caleb roared, grabbing a wine bottle by the neck, wielding it like a club. "Who sent you? Who are you working for?" "I'm working for the people you killed," Rowan screamed, dropping the act. She kicked off her heels. "Trial B, Caleb. I know about the microclots. I know about my father. Your father." Caleb laughed, a manic sound. "Oh, this is rich. This is poetic." He lunged at her. Rowan ducked. The bottle smashed against the shelf, spraying red wine and glass everywhere. "Flux now," she screamed into her earpiece. "I can't override the door. He's locked it manually." Flux shouted. Rowan was trapped in a glass box with a murderer, 80 stories above the ground. And he had the key. The heavy, hermetic seal of the wine vault door hissed shut, locking with a finality that echoed in Rowan's bones. The air inside, usually a crisp 60 degrees to preserve the delicate chemistry of the vintage Bordeaux, suddenly felt suffocating. It was no longer a sanctuary of wealth. It was a transparent coffin suspended 80 stories above the city. Caleb Sterling stood by the door, his hand still hovering near the biometric scanner. The transformation in him was terrifying. The charming, philanthropic mask he wore for the cameras had dissolved completely. In its place was something feral. His eyes, usually cool and calculating, were wide with a mixture of panic and murderous rage. He looked at Rowan not as a woman, not even as an enemy, but as a glitch in his perfect system that needed to be deleted. "You," he whispered, the word dripping with disbelief. "You're the waitress, the one who crawled for $1. Rowan didn't retreat. She stood her ground near the center pedestal, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird, but her face remained a mask of ice. "I'm the woman who's going to end you, Caleb, and I didn't crawl for $1. I crawled to survive you." Caleb laughed, a sharp, barking sound that bounced off the glass walls. "Survive me? You think you can walk into my home, trick me, and just walk out? Do you have any idea who I am?" He took a step forward, his expensive dress shoes clicking ominously on the marble floor. "I am the industry. I am the reason this city has a skyline. And you're nothing. You're a rounding error." He lunged for the nearest shelf. His hand closed around the neck of a heavy bottle, a 1990 Margot. With a grunt of exertion, he swung it against the edge of the granite tasting table. Crash! The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Dark red wine exploded outward like arterial spray, drenching the pristine floor. Caleb turned back to her, clutching the jagged, broken neck of the bottle. The glass shards caught the dim track lighting, glinting like teeth. "You ruined everything," he screamed, slashing the air inches from Rowan's face. Rowan scrambled backward, her heels skidding on the wine-slicked floor. She grabbed a heavy wooden case of Pinot Noir from a lower shelf and shoved it into his path. Caleb stumbled, cursing, kicking the wood aside with a savage grunt. He was fast, fueled by adrenaline and the terrified realization that his world was cracking. "You think a few photos in a book will stop me?" Caleb roared, stalking her as she retreated toward the back wall. "I own the police commissioner. I own the judges. Even if you have those photos, who's going to believe a waitress over a billionaire? I'll say you broke in. I'll say you were a deranged stalker obsessed with me. I'll say I killed you in self-defense." He cornered her against a towering display of Italian reds. There was nowhere left to run. The glass wall behind her offered a panoramic view of Seattle, indifferent and distant. Rowan's chest heaved. She held up her hands, trembling not from fear, but from the sheer magnitude of the moment. "It's not just photos, Caleb. It's the bodies, the microclots in the Aegis valve. You knew the valve was killing people in Trial B. You signed the death warrants every time you approved a shipment. They were necessary sacrifices," Caleb bellowed, slamming his free hand against the metal shelving, making the priceless bottles rattle in their cradles. "Progress requires blood, you stupid girl. Do you think innovation happens without risk? Those people, they were sick. They were dying anyway. I gave them a chance at immortality, and if a few hearts stopped so millions could to beat, that is a price I was willing to pay. And my father," Rowan whispered. The name hung in the air between them. "Doctor Arthur Bennett. Was he a necessary sacrifice too, or was he just inconvenient?" Caleb stopped. The mention of the name seemed to ground him, bringing a cruel, arrogant focus back to his eyes. He straightened his tuxedo jacket, wiping a smear of wine and sweat from his forehead. He thought he had won. He saw a woman cornered, weaponless, and alone. "Arthur Bennett," Caleb sneered, correcting the name with a dismissive wave of the jagged glass. "He was brilliant, I'll give him that. But he had a conscience, and a conscience is a liability in this business. He threatened to go to the FDA the morning before the IPO launched. He was going to leak the data. I couldn't let him destroy a billion-dollar valuation over a few faulty valves. He took a step closer, towering over her, the smell of expensive wine and metallic fear radiating off him. So, yes, I had his brakes cut. It wasn't personal. It was a business decision, clean, efficient, just like I'm going to be with you. Rowan stared at him. Tears streamed down her face, hot and angry, but her eyes were hard as flint. You admit it. You murdered him. I executed a liability, Caleb corrected, raising the jagged glass shard high. And now, I'm going to execute another one. Say goodbye, Rowan. He tensed his muscles to strike. Rowan didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. Instead, she looked him dead in the eye, a small, terrifying smile touching her lips. Now. Click. The lights in the penthouse didn't just flicker. They died instantly, plunging them into absolute, suffocating darkness. What? Caleb froze, disoriented, the glass shard lowering slightly. Flux security. In the pitch black. A single, tiny red light blinked on the wall behind Rowan. It wasn't an alarm. It was the live indicator of a hidden camera lens embedded in the shelving one Rowan hadn't placed. But one Caleb had installed himself to monitor his precious collection. Rowan's voice cut through the dark, calm and cold, echoing off the glass. Flux just hacked your smart home system. Caleb, he didn't just unlock the door. He turned on your security feed, and he's broadcasting it. What are you talking about? Caleb hissed, fumbling for his phone, his bravado wavering. Look at the wall, Rowan commanded. Suddenly, the floor-to-ceiling glass wall of the vault, usually transparent, turned opaque. It lit up with a blinding white light, transforming into a giant smart screen. The image that appeared wasn't a movie. It was a live stream, platform YouTube Live, Channel Justice for Arthur. Viewers 2415202 watching now. Title CEO Caleb Sterling confesses to murder. Leave. Caleb stared at the screen in horror. He saw himself, bathed in the grainy, night vision green of the security camera, holding a jagged bottle. His face twisted in hate. He heard his own voice, amplified and distorted, repeating the words he had just spoken. I had his brakes cut. It wasn't personal. It was a business decision. The chat on the side of the screen was scrolling so fast it was a blur of rage. User 77. Murderer Rowan's army. Oh my God. He actually admitted it. Techbro_99. I recorded this. It's over. He's done. Justice now, send the police. News Daily, we are restreaming this live. No, Caleb whispered. The bottle slipped from his fingers and shattered on the floor. The sound lost under the sudden roar of blood in his ears. No, 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 it's a trick, it's AI, it's a deep fake. It's live, Caleb, Rowan said. Stepping out of the corner, she kicked the glass away from him. 2 million witnesses. You can bribe a judge. You can bribe a senator. But you can't bribe 2 million people watching you confess in real time. Caleb fell to his knees. He looked from the screen to Rowan, his eyes hollow. You little rat. You destroyed me. I didn't destroy you, Rowan said, looking down at him with pity, not hate. I just handed you the bill, and then the sound came. At first, it was faint, a low wail from the streets below. Then it grew louder, piercing, dozens of sirens wailing in a chaotic harmony. Red and blue lights began to flash against the windows of the skyscraper, rising up from the streets like a rising tide of judgment. The helicopter rotors beat against the glass, shaking the room. Caleb covered his face with his hands, sobbing. He wasn't crying for his victims. He wasn't crying for Arthur Bennett. He was crying because the game was over, and for the first time in his life, he had lost. Rowan walked past him toward the now open vault door. She paused at the threshold, her silhouette framed by the flashing police lights outside. She didn't look back. She didn't need to. She walked out of the vault, leaving Caleb Sterling alone in his glass cage, surrounded by his expensive wine and the ruins of his life. The fall of Caleb Sterling was not a gentle descent. It was a skyscraper collapsing in slow motion, dust choking the very city he once thought he owned. The live stream from the penthouse had lasted only 11 minutes before the SWAT team breached the reinforced doors, but those 11 minutes had burned through the internet like wildfire. By the time the officers dragged Caleb out in handcuffs, his face pale, streaked with sweat and tears, was already a meme, a symbol of hubris shattered. Rowan stood on the sidewalk below, wrapped in a shock blanket an EMT had given her. Though she wasn't cold, she watched as they brought him out. The flashing red and blue lights painted the wet streets in a chaotic rhythm. Reporters were already swarming, shouting questions that Caleb couldn't answer. He looked small, without his tailored suit, without the lighting of l'orangerie or the height of his tower. He was just a man, a frightened, pathetic man who had gambled his soul and lost. He didn't see her. His eyes were fixed on the pavement, unable to meet the gaze of the city he had deceived. But Rowan saw him. She watched him being shoved into the back of a squad car, his head ducking to avoid the doorframe a final involuntary bow to the reality he had tried to ignore. The days that followed were a blur of legal depositions and media frenzy. The Waitress whistleblower, they called her. Rowan hated the nickname, but she understood its power. It was a narrative the world needed, the powerless toppling the powerful. She spent hours in small, sterile rooms with FBI agents. Walking them through the data flux had helped her secure. The red ledger which police recovered from the vault thanks to her tip was the final nail in the coffin. It detailed everything: the bribes to Senator Thorne, the falsified safety reports for the Aegis valve, and, most damning of all, the handwritten order to neutralize Arthur Bennett. The trial of the century began 3 months later. The courtroom was packed every single day. People camped out on the courthouse steps, holding signs that read, "Justice for Arthur" and "People over profits." Caleb's defense team, a phalanx of the most expensive lawyers in the country, tried every trick in the book. They claimed the video was a deep fake. They tried to paint Rowan as a disgruntled former employee with a history of mental instability. They even tried to suggest that Arthur Bennett had been suicidal. But Rowan was ready. When she took the stand, she didn't wear the expensive disguises of Sophia Vane. She wore a simple grey cardigan and slacks. She looked tired, but her voice was steady. She recounted the night at the restaurant, the humiliation, the crawling on the floor for $1. She described the fear of finding her father's notes, and she looked directly at the jury when she explained why she had done it. "I didn't do it for money," she told the prosecutor, her voice ringing clear in the silent courtroom. "I didn't do it for fame. I did it because Caleb Sterling thought people like me, people like my father, were disposable. He thought we were just numbers on a spreadsheet. I had to show him that even the smallest number can change the equation." The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the foreman read the verdict, The tension in the room was so thick, it felt like a physical weight. Guilty. First-degree murder, racketeering, fraud, embezzlement. Caleb Sterling sat motionless. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He simply stared at the empty space in front of him, as if trying to calculate an escape route that didn't exist. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 150 years for the financial crimes. His assets were seized immediately. The penthouse, the cars, the wine collection, all of it was auctioned off to pay restitution to the families of the victims who had died during the faulty clinical trials. Sterling Hale Pharmaceuticals was dissolved. In a landmark decision, the court ordered that the patent for the Aegis valve be released into the public domain. Within weeks, generic manufacturers were producing it at a fraction of the cost, making the life-saving technology available to anyone who needed it, regardless of their insurance status. It was the legacy Arthur Bennett had always wanted. 6 months later, the media storm had finally begun to settle. Rowan sat in her small apartment, not the one in the industrial district, but a modest, sun-filled place near the university. She had used the reward money from the whistleblower program not to buy diamonds or luxury cars, but to pay off her debts and start fresh. She drove out to the cemetery on a Tuesday morning. The sky was a brilliant, piercing blue, the kind that makes everything look sharp and new. She walked the familiar path to her father's grave. The grass was green and well-tended. "Hey, Dad," she whispered, kneeling down to brush a few fallen leaves from the granite headstone. Arthur Bennett, beloved father, truth-seeker. "It's over," she said, her voice catching in her throat. "He can't hurt anyone else. They took his name off the hospital wing yesterday. It's going to be named after the victims now." She sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind rustling through the maple trees. For years, this place had been a source of pain, a reminder of justice denied. But today, it felt peaceful. The heavy stone that had been sitting on her chest since the day of the car accident was finally gone. She felt light. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. It was a text from Jean-Luc, the former manager of l'Orangerie. "Mademoiselle Bennett, I hope this message finds you well. The restaurant has been sold to a new ownership group. They are aware of your history. They were wondering if you would consider coming in. Not as a server. They are looking for a general manager with integrity. They said you have grit." Rowan stared at the screen. She remembered Jean-Luc's face as he kicked her out into the rain. She remembered the shame of that night, but she also remembered the fire it had ignited in her. She smiled, a genuine, easy smile. She typed back, "Thanks for the offer." "Jean-Luc, but I've had enough of the restaurant industry. I'm going back to school. I'm finishing my dad's work. I'm going into bioethics law. Someone has to keep an eye on the next Caleb Sterling." She hit send and stood up. She dusted off her knees, a gesture that used to remind her of her lowest moment, but now felt like a badge of honor. She had crawled so she could stand tall. She walked back to her car, her steps light on the gravel path. As she drove out of the cemetery gates, she passed a billboard that used to display Caleb's smiling face, advertising the future of medicine. It had been painted over in white, a blank canvas waiting for a new message. Rowan turned up the radio. The song playing was upbeat, full of energy. She rolled down the window and let the cool air rush in. She wasn't Sophia Vane. She wasn't the poor waitress. She was Rowan Bennett, and for the first time in her life, the future didn't look like a threat, it looked like a promise. And that, my friends, is the end of Caleb Sterling's reign. The man who thought he was a god found out he was just a prisoner of his own greed. He believed that money could buy silence, but he forgot that the truth has a voice of its own, and sometimes that voice belongs to the person serving your coffee. Rowan didn't just get revenge, she reshaped the entire system. She proved that one person, armed with courage and the truth, is stronger than $1 billion. It's a powerful reminder that no matter how small you feel, you have the power to stand up to giants. What do you think? Did the punishment fit the crime? Would you have done what Rowan did? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know you want more real-life dramas like this. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who needs some inspiration, and hit subscribe so you never miss a new story. I post thrilling tales of karma and justice every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, treat everyone with respect. You never know who is watching.